Alright guys, we are back and I hope you enjoyed that first workout, that master's class, and I hope you saw a little bit of what I was talking about with the complexity of some of those exercises, and I hope that gives you a little bit better understanding, and I really hope that you got to work out at the same time. So, next up I want to give just a little bit of discussion points, a little bit of talking points. So, one of the things you guys should notice from having taken your Sparta classes is that there's a certain atmosphere to it. We try to keep it a little bit dark. We try to give it that just gritty, tougher feel. I want you to think of the movie The 300 when they say, well then we will fight in the shade. It is that kind of mentality, that darkness, that just inner grit, that just that inner Spartan, that inner beast that wants to come out of you based on the atmosphere and the surroundings around you. Again, music, trying to do the same exact kind of thing. The music should be loud, it should be intense, it should be motivating. We have motivational speeches built in there. We have all kinds of heavy metal songs, rock songs, rap songs, everything we can think of to really get your people fired up while trying to put a good combination of different genres of music, different artists, things like that. So if you guys have suggestions for songs, please send them our way. We always try to keep that list updated for you guys and keep you with some of the best. It's also a little bit different than what you'll hear in any other classes. And again, part of it is because we don't need a certain beat, we don't need timing. It's not your traditional poppy, bouncy, happy group exercise music. Next up, we want this program to feel badass. Again, remember who we're targeting. And when I say badass, none of the exercises by themselves are all that badass. So doing a push-up variation, some type of kettlebell squat, kettlebell swing, none of those exercises by themselves are inherently all that crazy, all that difficult, all that strange or unique. But when you combine our entire program together, it's that entire package that we're giving them that is unique. There's just something different about it that feels crazy, feels unique, feels badass. Then, as I mentioned, with that master's program, you guys got to be the best. So if you're going to teach other people how to do it, you got to make sure that your form is on point. You've got to work every one of those exercises before you launch that program to your clients. You've got to make sure you can do it, and not only do it, but do it well. Next up, we want to make sure it's not unsafe. So everything we do is tough. We put some crazy stuff, crazy looking stuff in there, some unique new things, but everything we want to make sure it's safe. So safety for your participants is one of your absolute top priorities. Encouragement from the instructor. So there's a lot of times where instructors can just bark at people, and that works for a small percentage of the population. It doesn't work for everybody. So you guys want to make sure that you're not just demanding them, you're not just slamming them, you're not just beating them down, telling them what they're doing wrong, or just saying go, 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 because nobody wants that. I want you guys to be encouraging and motivating. Yes, I want you to push them harder than they thought they could push themselves, but do it in a positive and motivating way. That's why you're a coach. Then, when correcting, one of the most important things, one of the things I want to see is you guys get down on the floor with the people. So if you're telling them how to do a half get up, a hip bridge, a push up, get on the floor and show them how to do it. Standing there telling them is one thing. Some people learn verbally. Other people are visual learners. They need to see it. They want you to do it alongside them. They want to pick up on what you're doing. Get on the floor, show them, so say it, do it with them. And then safety. Again, I mentioned safety a second ago. Make sure you're using things like anti-burst stability balls versus really cheap ones. Make sure that you've got rubber dumbbells on concrete so that they're not sliding all around. Things like that. Every little bit of safety that you guys can incorporate, make sure you're doing that. And then you'll notice, this was just kind of one little thing, should have been up a little bit earlier I think, but you'll notice from that master's class that we did, your forearms probably got burnout, and you noticed, again, a number of complex exercises. But if you ever feel those kind of things, if something doesn't feel right in a routine that you're given, please let us know, give us the feedback. That's how we make this program better. As you guys build into your master certification and start getting into different levels of instructing, and you're writing some of your own programs, those are just some key components you want to keep in mind. So, the basics. So we start off with instructor requirements. In order to be a level 1, a basic Sparta instructor, you need a couple things. You need your CPR and your first aid certification. You don't necessarily have to have any other group exercise certification prior to this. Why? Because this course is going to give you everything you need. We've had people take this course that have taken basic group exercise certification courses and it blew it out of the water. So we're trying to give you everything you need to be a group exercise instructor plus be a Sparta instructor. If you want to be a level 2 instructor, a master instructor, you need to have at least a group exercise certification, and it better be a good one, or a personal training certification, plus your CPR and first aid certification, and already have your level 1 basic Sparta instructor certification. So, again, I mentioned a little bit ago about safety being your #1 goal. So one of your main objectives when you're walking around teaching a Sparta class is to be a safety spotter. And if you guys have taken the amount of classes that you're supposed to before you came through this, you'll know exactly what I mean. Your instructor should be walking around, somebody's doing a back lunge, and inevitably somebody else threw a dumbbell down on the floor. Everything gets scattered in a class like that, right? We got 20 stations, stuff everywhere. Inevitably stuff's going to fall under people's feet. People are getting tired, they're not looking, they step back, they're going to roll an ankle if they step on it. So as you're walking around, you're not just correcting, you've got eagle eyes on the floor. Your job is to make sure that everyone stays safe. So you're going to keep your eyes on the equipment, on the floor, on the participants, all of that. Make sure that they're safe, get the stuff out of their way. Knowing whether an exercise is appropriate for everyone or not. We have a sign at our club that basically tells all participants when you come in, if you've got a pre-existing condition, an injury, a limitation, something that our instructors should know, tell them before the class starts. Because if I know that you've got a limitation, I can better help you than if you never tell me and I try to figure it out as we're going and I go, wow, that person's wincing in pain, or you go, hey, I got hurt. So encourage your participants before class to disclose anything that they've got, or if you notice it, which will happen, you're going to walk around and say, that doesn't look right, they don't seem, like they feel right, that it seems like they're in pain, not moving right. Make sure you're paying attention to that. And then make sure that it's appropriate for them. If it's not, either give them a modification, some type of variation of the exercise, either up or down, or change the exercise altogether. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. If you've got somebody with a shoulder issue that can't press at all, and it's an upper body pressing station, don't make them press. Okay? So whether it's overhead, flat, whatever, if it bothers them, get them out of that position. Have them do some core work. Have them do a carry. Have them do something else. This is functional training, high intensity training. Keep them moving, give them another station. Contraindicated exercises. One thing we never, ever want to see, and again, for these level 1 workouts, we're writing them for you, but we never want to see unsupported spinal flexion. So what we're talking about here is basically rounding of the spine, unsupported meaning we don't have support by placing our hands on our thighs or by properly bracing and hinging and sliding the hips back. So this kind of a motion right here where we're rounding the spine, putting a ton of load as we bend forward. We make sure that never happens in a class, no matter what. Also, be aware of the surface. This can actually make a big difference. If you guys happen to have a group exercise room that is carpeted and you try to do something like a crab flip back kick, carpet tends to grab your shoe, grab your sneaker. So if you try to pivot with your foot on a carpeted surface, what's going to happen is your foot may catch, your ankle may not turn, and as we're going to talk about later, that ankle's a mobile joint, whereas your knee is not. Well, if you suddenly immobilize that mobile joint and you start twisting on that immobile joint, that knee, that's where you're going to run into problems. So make sure that the surface is appropriate for the exercise, or that you can make some type of modification for it given the scenario. So even though we write the workouts for you, everybody's facility is a little bit different, so be cognizant of your surroundings, of your surfaces. Also, with any Sparta class, one of the biggest issues is a lot of reps is going to lead to form breakdown. No matter what, it's inevitable, that's going to happen. So when you have somebody going hard as they possibly can for a minute with any exercise, they're going to break down their form. It's not going to be pretty, it's not going to stay good. So number one, we keep the weights pretty light. We very rarely throw in any type of barbell exercise, Olympic lift, anything like that. And we keep the weight light for that reason. So as the form starts to break down, we're not risking injury by overloading bad form. The other thing is, tell them to take a break. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. We actually encourage it. The idea of Sparta is not to go 40 stations for 1 minute. It's to go as long as you can with good form for those 40 stations without that form breakdown. So encourage them to go till they feel their hips sagging on a push-up. At that point, stop. Or modify. Drop to the knees, go up to a bar, whatever it may be. But we want as many reps as possible with good form, and that is absolutely crucial. Alright, so if you guys can't tell, I'm kind of an energetic guy. I like to have fun. I'm kind of wound up. I love what I do. I love exercise. I love the Sparta program. And you guys need to embody that as well. You need to have energy. You need to come fired up to those classes. Because a lot of people that are coming for a workout, especially an ass-kicking workout, are dragging their feet in like, man, I really wasn't sure if I wanted to come tonight. And they want to leave feeling like, I'm glad I came tonight. So bring the energy, bring the noise, get them hyped up, get them into the workout, be fun, be motivating, be energetic. Even if you have to, we want you to act yourself into that higher energy level. There's days where you don't want to do it. You don't want to be there. You just don't want to be at work. I get it. We all go through that. Fake it till you make it. That's one of my favorite sayings, and you guys need to embody that. Make it happen no matter what. When you coach, you want to coach to push people to their limit, but not over it. So we talked a little bit about going as hard as you can, or as long as you can, with good form before that form breakdown. The other thing we want people to do is we want them to go as hard as they can, but to stop short of feeling like garbage. We don't want them on the floor feeling like they're going to pass out and die. Why? Because we want them to come back. There's an enjoyment factor to exercise that is directly related, correlated to how long they're going to stick with it and their chances of success. So make sure that they're pushing hard, feel like they really worked, but also that they didn't quite overdo it. I guess the last point on this one would just be, whatever you guys do, anytime you interact with your clients, teaching Sparta or not, do the absolute best that you can. Do everything you can to make that class, that moment, that opportunity you have to touch their lives the best part of their day, and you guys will be successful instructors and you'll keep them coming back. So next we're going to kind of shift gears just a little bit. So we talked about what the program is, kind of how it works, a little bit about what you need to bring to the table. Well, now we're going to get into it a little bit more. So as an instructor, one of the, I guess the hardest parts, one of the most challenging things when you're getting started is knowing how to assess risk, how to help people get better, how to modify for people, and those sorts of things. So we have a few slides on the process of risk evaluation. So basically we're talking about information evaluating exercise risks comes from research in biomechanics and ergonomics, two fields that consider the principles of physics, forces, movement, and tissue adaptation. So basically, as you guys kind of read through this, and there is more information down here at the bottom, you guys are welcome to check out that link for a little bit more info, and I highly recommend you guys do, because the more you know, the better you're going to be at your job, the better you're going to feel about it as well. But tissues that play a role in movement are subjected to forces or loads that act on the tissues and contribute to either their adaptation and strengthening or their failure and injury. The goal of fitness professionals is to promote positive adaptations while minimizing injury risk. The safety of a given load is influenced by several factors, including the type, size of the load, and the nature and health of the tissue subjected to the load. Goes on a little bit more, but basically, you guys, as basic Sparta instructors, aren't going to be making the workout. So that's going to be given to you. So the type of exercise, the modality, the equipment that we're going to use, and the basic weights are going to be outlined for you. However, what we can't determine for you is the quality of the tissue, the quality of the person, the quality of the movement, the joints, of the Spartan that you're taking through the program. That's where you guys heavily come in. So you guys need to assess the people in your class and say, this isn't right for them. If it's not right for them, you need to change it. You need to modify it or give them a completely different exercise. So be very, very aware. Watch your people. Be in tune with their bodies, the way they move, the quality of their movements, and things like that in order to help prevent injury and prevent risk. So, we talked about no unsupported spinal flexion, right? Meaning we're not just bending over, rounding the spine, and we're sure as hell not loading it. Please do not do that. In our stretching and our cool down at the very end, you'll notice we don't do any unsupported spinal flexion in that position either. Make sure it never happens in your class. The reason why, it's outlined. You guys already have this. I'm not going to talk you to death. You guys can read through it. Make sure you read through this. This is probably going to be on your test. So it is extremely important that you guys understand why we don't load this way. Alright, so again, not to beat a dead horse, but I want to make sure you guys understand this. When we talk about form, one of the most important things is quality over quantity, meaning we need to be aware of over reps without coaching form. Sometimes you may feel like you're being a pain in someone's ass. This person knows what they're doing. They've been coming to Sparta for years. If their form sucks, their form sucks. And it's your job to make sure they don't hurt themselves. So step in, encourage them to fix it in the right way, or encourage them to take a break. As many as you can with good form, stop and rest when you need to. One important thing to remember, like we said, you don't have to go the entire time. What I want you guys to remember is most beginners cannot go the entire time. When we're talking about high-intensity interval training, when you first get started, many beginners may only be able to go 10 or 20 seconds. Set that expectation up front. If you don't, a couple things are going to happen. Number one, they're probably going to end up puking. We've seen it a lot. So encourage them to take it slow, especially their very first round through. Let them feel it out. Get a feel for the class, the pace that they should be going at. If they go 110% right out of the gate, they're not going to make it through your class. They're not going to enjoy it. Even if they don't get sick, they run a risk of injury, they're probably not going to come back. So give them the heads up on that. Make sure you're coaching that right. We also want to teach at an intermediate level. So for a lot of our exercises, when you guys show them, do the demos, kind of instruct them how to do it, you want to show the middle of the road option for the most part. You can show a higher and a lower option as well. But if you're only going to show one thing, you always want to show the intermediate. Then as you're walking around, if it's too easy for someone, show them a higher variation. If it's too hard, let's bring it down a level, regress that exercise just a little bit. But for the most part, you've only got so much time to do your demos before class starts, so focus on those intermediate levels. Exercises that are too complex, take too much time to teach, run a greater risk of injury. We've kind of self-eliminated a lot of those exercises from the program already, but just kind of keep that in mind as well. Remember too that you can't watch everyone. So a lot of your job, say you have 40 people in class, you got 20 stations, 2 people at every station, you're not going to be able to keep an eye on every single person at every single station. You've got 1 minute. You can't go to 20 different stations, correct people in that amount of time. So you need to be aware of where your highest risk and highest failure stations are and spend your time there. Because if you have somebody on a station that they're not doing it quite right, but you analyze, basically use a risk assessment analysis and say, it may not be right, it may not be pretty, but they're not going to hurt themselves, that's not where you need to spend your time. You need to spend your time at the stations where somebody runs a risk of actually getting injured or causing a bigger problem. So be aware of that, analyze that beforehand. You guys should be going through all of these workouts before you ever teach them. Doing that will help you kind of assess where those stations are at. The instructor must be able to do the exercise. So this is a big one. And there is a little asterisk here because there are going to be stations where it's not physically possible for you to do that for one reason or another. Recently, for example, I've got a bad shoulder and I'm about to have rotator cuff surgery in a few weeks. I could not demo an exercise that was similar to a crab flip because of the stress that it put on the shoulder. So I had a couple options. Either one, I completely changed that station out, which was one option. or I bring another instructor in to teach that. I can still coach it verbally, but I had another instructor come in that was taking the class that could demo the exercise in its full variation, and then also be there to assist people with it as we went through. So make sure you guys are paying attention to that. Analyze and pre-screen participants. We talked about that a little bit. When they come in, if you've never met them before, you don't know them, get to know them before class starts. Try to find out what you can, make sure that there's no underlying issues, problems, pains, and aches. And then a dynamic warm-up. We're going to get into that here in a second. But every single time that we do a class, the warm-up is paramount. Warm-up is probably one of the most important components to the workout because, as we said, one of your main jobs is safety. And one of the ways you can promote safety is to make sure they're warmed up first. That's going to prevent sudden strain on the muscles, tears, things like that. Please make sure that they're warmed up and that you're following the basic format that we lay out for Sparta for the dynamic warm-up. So, again, I mentioned this before, we're not trying to push people to this point. Here's the finish line, this guy came up this close, right? It's funny for us to laugh at, but at the same time, this sucks. Nobody wants to feel this way. If this is your Sparta class, this is finishing, this is where he's at, this person's not coming back. Make sure they finish, make sure they're tired, make sure they get a workout, that kind of thing, but make sure that they finish. We don't want failure. Again, we don't beat them just to beat them. We don't want everybody laying on the floor, passed out, looking like they may not make it through the night. And just one more for you. One more example of what not to do. And kiss the MRSA. That one's just gross. Don't ever lay face down on the mats like that. Okay, so we talked earlier about the different styles of classes, what's popular, what's not. So one of the main reasons that we don't call this boot camp or even Sparta boot camp is because boot camp gets too they send two messages. So there's two different ways that people tend to look at boot camp, and of course this is just kind of a stereotype, doesn't necessarily mean this for everyone, but a lot of times people that haven't worked out or haven't worked out recently or are intimidated by workouts hear the name boot camp, and what do they think of? They think of drill sergeants, right? They think of military boot camp, and what happens there? You get screamed at, somebody spitting in your face, treating you like garbage. Whole lot of fun, I can tell you from personal experience. It sucks. Nobody wants that. It's not enjoyable in any way, shape, or form, so we try to avoid that. So we're trying to stay away from that one negative connotation there. The other one, for someone like me who has been through actual military boot camp, I look at it and go, this probably sucks, because the boot camps I've taken in the past have had that badass boot camp name and have left me feeling like disappointed. So we try to steer completely clear. We want to make sure that we're not intimidating people. We actually want to incorporate people. So we want them to feel incorporated. We want them to feel part of our team, part of our family. We want them to feel good and feel like they're getting what they want. So, fun and excitement. This is what we want to see from people. We want to see people working hard, and yes, that's my ugly mug that I chose to use for this first picture here for you guys. But the point being, we want them to have fun and work hard at the same time. They should be enjoying every bit of it. So as you can see here, again, these girls are working hard, throwing punches, alternating in and out, but they're smiling, having a good time at the same time. A lot of our classes end up becoming a social event for people too. They get to know each other, they get to bond with each other, they get to feel like, I went through this with this person. This is my brother, my sister, my friend, because we've done this together. So we want to encourage that bonding, that excitement, that fun. And afterwards, this is what I want people looking like. They should be sweaty. They should look like they're a little whooped, but they should be happy. So, how do we achieve that type of result? Well, first of all, we go to the RPE scale, or the rating of perceived exertion. So there's a couple different ways that the RPE scale has been broken down over the years. Essentially, it's accomplishing the same thing, but they originally started with one scale that was a 6 to 20 and moved into a 1 to 10 scale, which I'll talk about. But basically, you just rate, nowadays, we typically use the 1 to 10 scale. You rate your perceived level of exertion, how hard you're working, on a scale of 1 to 10, versus what has also been done using max heart rate. So you'll hear a lot about heart rate training, heart rate testing, that kind of thing, and how effective that is. And it can be extremely effective, except there's a couple issues. First of all, in order to get your max heart rate, you take 220 minus your age, then you figure out like a percentage. So you might tell people you want them to work out at 80% of their max heart rate. Fine, that's an effective way to make sure people are pushing hard enough and getting where you want them to. However, one standard deviation, so if they're off by just a little bit, in a 68% range, 2 standard deviation, 95% range, so great risk of over or under training. So basically all we're trying to say here is that if you miss a beat or two in calculating your actual heart rate, your room for error and for how hard you actually worked can be off substantially. So it's not incredibly accurate. It's very, very easy to miss a beat, count an extra beat, that kind of thing, especially when you're sweaty, tired, working hard. So in theory, using your max heart rate is a great way to go. And if you have a full setup with polar heart rate monitors displayed up on the screen, you're in a lot better situation. But I know a lot of the clubs don't have that available to them, and it's actually very difficult to use for a class like Sparta where you're literally rolling on the ground. Having something strapped to your chest is quite cumbersome and gets in the way. So we get that completely out of the way, and we tend to use the RPE scale. So, one other component to that, one other reason that we don't use the max heart rate. If you take somebody that's been working out for a long time, or an elite level athlete, or somebody that's just very fit, very in shape, and you ask them to get to 80% of their max heart rate, that's going to be extremely difficult. If you put me out there next to a friend of mine that's never worked out in his entire life, and you tell us both to get to 80% max heart rate at this station, what's going to happen is he's going to get there in 10 seconds. I may not get there in the entire minute, even though I'm really working my ass off at 100% effort. So it can really skew things, can really mess things up. So let's keep it simple. You know that acronym KISS, keep it simple, stupid. We don't want to make it too complicated for people. We want to keep it to where everybody can participate, everybody knows what's going on, it's accurate, and we're getting the results. So, I mentioned that the original scale, the Borg scale, went with a 6 to 20 range. It confused the hell out of a lot of people, because why on earth would you tell me on a scale of 6 to 20, where do you feel? Right? Because that's extremely difficult to figure out. Like 6 to 20, why does it not start at 1? Well, really what Borg did was he correlated it to heart rate. So just like we were talking about up here, he was trying to take the max heart rate idea, correlate it to a scale, and said, basically, he cut a 0 off the end. So instead of 60 to 200 beats per minute, he was looking at a scale of 6 to 20. So right on with his thinking, he took the max heart rate idea, said this is too complex, too much room for error, here's how we can simplify it. He had the right idea, but in recent years, we just simplified it. We went with that 1 to 10 scale and said, everybody kind of understands that. 10 meaning you're going to pass out, throw up, never want to come back again. 1, like you're sitting on the couch. In between there, where do you kind of feel? So where do we want people with Sparta? Well, about a 9. So we want all-out max effort, because this is high-intensity training. So it needs to be high intensity, but it's not kill-yourself training. It's not a level 10. So we want them just below that anaerobic threshold, that point where their body shuts down, that lactic acid system starts to fail, they cramp up, they feel like they can't go anymore, they can't breathe anymore, that kind of thing. And it should be tough but doable, but not to failure. Okay, so we talked a little bit in the very beginning about caloric expenditure, right? So, and we talked a little bit about calories in, calories out. Now, this is just some basic knowledge for you guys to have, because all fitness professionals should have this. So when you're looking at calories in versus calories out, we want to first start with the simple stuff. There's 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. So, hypothetically, if you either cut 3,500 calories out of your diet or burn 3,500 extra calories off, you should lose a pound of fat. Hypothetically, it works that way. We all know that a calorie is not a calorie, food is not a food. Different processed foods, different types of foods, things like that affect our body a little bit differently. But to keep it simple, 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of fat. You need to burn more calories than we take in to lose weight. So as I mentioned, 2 ways to do it. You can cut your intake, or you can increase the output, the expenditure. You can also do a combination of the two.